beginning, the relationship choice. This is life's healing choices. We've been looking at the Beatitudes, and we're in part 6 of this 8-part series. So we're now on the relationship choice, which we'll, in a second, we'll see it's Matthew chapter 5, verses 7 through 9. Well, everyone has broken relationships. In our pain and our woundedness, we can build walls to keep the pain out and to keep ourselves from being hurt again. When we do that, we end up locking ourselves in a prison and locking other people out. To rebuild relationships, you have to tear down these walls. That's what we've been talking about in the last 6 months. In the last 6 weeks, That's what we've been talking about in the last 6 weeks. The ways to tear down the walls between us and God and between us and other people. We talked about our choices and how the choices that we make often keep us in our hurts and our habits and our hang-ups. We talked about how making different choices can open up the possibilities that life can be radically different. As we look today at the 6th choice of life's healing choices, the relationship choice, there are 2 Beatitudes that we'll be concentrating on. These are the foundation of what we'll be talking about. So Matthew chapter 5, verse 7 says, "Happy are those who are merciful to others." And Matthew chapter 5, verse 9 says, "Happy are those who work for peace." The choice that you and I are going to have the opportunity to make in this time together is this: that you and I must evaluate all of our relationships, offer forgiveness to those who have hurt me, and make amends for harm that I've done to others, except when to do so would harm them or others. So there's that choice that we can make today: to evaluate my relationships, offer forgiveness to those who have hurt me, and make amends for harm that I've done to others, except when to do so would harm them or others. If I were going to take a survey of every single hurt that has ever happened in your life, I want you to think of everything, every person, and every situation that has ever wounded you, everything that you've ever done wrong to hurt other people. We would be writing until Jesus comes back, right? The list is absolutely endless of the ways that we have been hurt and the ways that we have hurt other people. The reason for that is that we love poorly. When you get right down to it, we don't love well. And because we don't love well, we are constantly hurting each other and need forgiveness and mercy. And we need those walls torn down on a daily basis. In Matthew chapter 18, Jesus tells, what I think is a very disturbing and yet a very profound story about forgiveness. I'm very uncomfortable with this story, but it's one of those stories that Jesus told, and he told it for a reason. He told it to change our lives. And so there are 2 really profound thoughts that I've been thinking about as it relates to me, in my own relationship, in my difficulty in forgiveness. And I want to share those things with you. They encourage me, and I hope that they'll encourage you as you work on the relationships in your life that need some repairing as well. So the first principle that Jesus shared in this story, I think, is so simple. Here it is. Because I have been forgiven, I can forgive. Because I have been forgiven, I can forgive. The foundation for us to be able to forgive this huge catalog that we just talked about, this huge catalog of hurts and wounds that all of us have accumulated, is because we have been forgiven. And because we have been forgiven, we are then able to forgive. I want you to picture this story in Matthew 18. I want you to picture this story here. Here is a servant who worked for a very wealthy king. He doesn't know when he gets up one morning that this is his judgment day. This is the day that it's all going to come down for him. He doesn't know it. He's just doing his life, and all of a sudden he gets the word that the king wants to see him. So he comes in. And the king is going over his books, and the king has discovered that this servant owes him $100,000. I don't know how this guy ended up with a $100,000 debt. The story doesn't tell us. But he had a debt that is gigantic. And the king says, pay up now. I want my $100,000. If you don't, I'm going to put you and your family and everything that you own in jail until you can pay up. The man, the servant, he falls down on his face and he begs his king for mercy. He says, please, if you'll just give me some more time, I will pay you back. I'll pay everything back, every penny. I'll pay it all back. The king, for some reason, his response to this gigantic, unpayable debt that this man owes to him says, okay, all right. You know what? I'll never talk about it again. You're free. I let you go. I release you from the debt that you have. Let's just pause right here and really think about this for a minute. This is actually you and me. This is really me, and it's really you in this story. You and I owe a debt to the king, to God. And that debt is an unpayable debt. It's a gigantic debt. It's compiled of everything that you've ever done or said or thought. It comes just by virtue of the fact that you are born in sin and we are separated from God. And we owe God a debt that is gigantic and we cannot pay it. Even like that servant who said, I'll work it off I'll work a little harder and I'll pay you off. He could have never done it. The debt that we owe to the king, to our God, is unpayable by us. We can't do it. We can't ever pay it back. So why did the king in the story forgive the man? Why does God forgive me? Why does he forgive you and I this debt that is so gigantic that you can't possibly ever pay it back? Why? Why would he have mercy on us? We're just little pitiful piles of cow manure, really. That's all we are. Yet that God would have mercy on us. It takes my breath away. I can't believe it. So why? It's because of Jesus. The debt didn't remain unpaid in me. The debt that I owe God did not remain unpaid. The debt that you owe God, it did not remain unpaid. You couldn't pay it. I couldn't pay it. But Jesus did. Because of what Jesus did in taking on the debt that I owe, God had mercy on me and on you. This passage tells us that we have a Father, a King, who sees the debt that we owe, and he knows that it's enormous. He knows how gigantic this debt is, and he knows that we have blown it. Yet he doesn't approach us with anything but arms that say, come home. Welcome home. You're here. I've missed you. And he hugs us, and he kisses us, and he says that you are my child. You and I have layers and layers and layers deep within our soul. In the depths of our soul, there's junk. There's garbage. There is stuff that is so pathetic and so awful. I don't necessarily mean all the sins that we categorize as being really mean or wicked or nasty or bad. I mean just the fact that you have sin in your soul, and I do too. We keep it so well hidden from each other. Very few of you really know the depths of the ugliness in anyone else's soul. We would be horrified if the real depths within us could be seen by others. But God sees it. He sees it. He has already seen it, and he doesn't run. He sees the places that are so dark, that have never seen the light of day. He sees the places where you struggle and where you hurt, where you question and where you doubt. He sees where you blaspheme. He sees where you cried in agony. He sees it all, and he doesn't run. He loves you. He doesn't run. He has graced you. He has had mercy on you. Because he has treated us in this way, he asks us to treat others with that same kind of mercy and grace. So because I receive mercy and forgiveness from God, I can forgive others. It's simple, right? A plus B equals C. God forgives me, I forgive you. Simple, we're done. And that's the way it always goes, right? Right? Isn't that the way it is in your life? God forgives you, so you forgive everyone else? There's a problem. I don't like to forgive. Let's be honest. I don't always like to forgive, and I bet you don't either. As I have really thought about this, I think the biggest barriers in my personal relationships, through my lifetime, up to this very day, through marriage, through being a parent, through close relationships, the deepest barriers that I have had to success in my relationships is me. Not wanting to forgive. So instead of God forgives me and I forgive you, it's more typically that God forgives me and I don't forgive you. There's something very distorted and even dangerous about that kind of thought pattern and that way of responding. So that leads us to the second truth in this passage. It's a very chilling and disturbing truth. The unforgiving become the unforgiven. Picture the story again. Back to the king and the servant. The servant receives forgiveness from the king. He skipped out of the king's chamber. He's happy, he's excited. The king has forgiven him. His debt has been forgiven. He's a happy man. He's avoided prison. He doesn't have to pay back this gigantic debt. His wife and his kids aren't going to prison. He is happy. Well, as he's skipping along down the road, he sees a guy that he remembers owes him $10. He goes up to this guy who owes him $10. He grabs him by the collar and he says, "You owe me $10, and I want it now. Pay it up right now." The other guy goes, "Okay, I realize that. No, I want it now. If you don't, I'm going to have you thrown in prison. You're going to go to prison, you and your wife and your kids, if you can't pay me $10 right now. You're done. You're toast. Get out of here. You're in prison." I don't know about you, but I can see myself in the role of that ungrateful servant. I could have auditioned for that part. I could have had my name written all over that one. It's embarrassing to have to admit it, but the truth is, when it comes to my sin and my weakness and my failure and the ways that I harm the people in my life, I want mercy. I want mercy from God. I want mercy. I want him to forgive me. I want him to excuse it. I want him to realize that, oh, I had a bad day or a week or whatever it is. I want God's mercy. And I want the people in my life that I've wounded to look at me in the same way. I know you've had a hard day. It's been a rough week. Don't worry about it. It's okay. What you said yesterday hurt me, but it's okay. It's all right. Mercy. I'm greedy for mercy. I want it. But when it comes to the sin and the woundedness and the failures of the people that I love, particularly my wife and my kids, it's a whole different kettle of fish. When it comes to being wounded, I'm not so interested in mercy. I want justice. I want you to pay up. I want you to pay what you owe me. You hurt me, you need to pay. You wounded me, you need to pay. I'm angry and I deserve to be angry. What you did was wrong. I'm going to be mad about it. I'm going to make you pay for it. If you don't like it, too bad for you. And if you're not careful, I'll bring it up again at some other point. But in this story, the king hears about his ungrateful servant, what he did. So he calls the first servant back and he says, "You evil, wicked man. I forgave you a debt that you couldn't pay. I forgave you a debt that you could never, ever pay. Why couldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant who owed you so much less than what you owed me? Why couldn't you have had mercy?" So it says that the king threw him in prison to be tormented. The idea is, if you are not forgiven, at the very least you need to understand that you are creating a torture chamber for yourself. So you're going to build a wall around your heart. If you hold on to resentment and bitterness and unforgiveness, you will build a wall around your own heart, and the emotional prison that you will be in, and the torment that you will put yourself under, can break you. This Matthew 18 is not an isolated teaching. Look at these verses. Matthew 5:7 says, "God blesses those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy." That's the beatitude. That's the basis of this whole sermon. Matthew chapter 5, verses 16 and 14. 6. Matthew chapter 5, verses 6, 14, and 15 says this: "For if you forgive men when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their sin, your Father will not forgive you." Mark 11:25 says, "But when you are praying, first forgive anyone that you are holding a grudge against, so that your Father in heaven will forgive your sins too." Luke 6:37 says, "Stop judging others, and you will not be judged. Stop criticizing others, for it will all come back on you. If you forgive others, you will be forgiven." James says in chapter 2, verse 13, "For there will be no mercy for you if you have not been merciful to others. But if you have been merciful, then God's mercy towards you will win out over his judgment against you." I read a quote this week that says, "As long as we are unable to forgive, we keep ourselves chained to the unforgiving. We give them rent-free space in our mind, emotional shackles in our heart, and the right to torment us in the small hours of the night." John Perkins says, "The saddest people I know are those who are unable to forgive." I am afraid that unforgiveness and bitterness and resentment become like bed sores in our lives. You've done some good work of cleaning up some relationships. You're getting better. But just as everybody has some place in their soul where there's unforgiveness, resentment, and bitterness, I want you to know that unforgiveness and bitterness is a poison that is truly slowly eating through your healthy relationships, in the same way a bed sore will eat through healthy tissue until it gets to the bone and causes death. The bitterness in your life, the resentment in your life, the anger, the hostility that you feel that you will not deal with, that you just keep covering up, is like a bed sore. It's eating the healthy relationships in your life. And one of these days, if you're not careful, you won't know it until somebody comes to you and says, "I'm done. I'm out of your life now. I want you out of my life. I don't want to be with you ever again." Friendships die, and love dies, and marriages die. The main reason they do is because of this unforgiving sin and resentment. So it's time. My friends, it's time to forgive. It's time to release the offender. It's time to stop telling the story. It's time to stop stabbing yourself with the pain that you feel towards those that you cannot or will not forgive. You have been forgiven a debt that you cannot pay. So whatever wound comes your way is not as grievous as the wound that God has against you. That seems so hard to believe because some of us, we haven't really done anything bad or evil or nasty, We don't have this horrific story that will stand the hair on the back of your neck up. We don't have that kind of story. But what we have is an unpayable debt to God. You have an unpayable debt, but it's been paid. So anything else that happens to you in your life is still not as grievous as that debt that was against God. C.S. Lewis said to be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable, because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you. So how do you become a forgiver? How do you let go of the layers and layers and layers of resentment and bitterness and anger that sometimes sits in our soul? So here are two ways that I know, and neither of them is very easy. Number one, first is to nail it to the cross. Nail it to the cross. Take the wound, take the unforgiveness, take the bitterness, and you nail it figuratively to the cross of Jesus Christ. The one who paid your debt, the one who made the unpayable debt finally settled and forgiven. Because he paid for my debt, I can take whatever debt you owe me. And I can take that debt that you owe me and I can nail it to his cross. Because of his forgiveness for me, then I can forgive you. In Matthew 18, the servant didn't get another chance. The king found out that he had blown it, and the king just threw him into prison. But you get another chance. You're here today, and that means you have another chance. It doesn't really matter who it is you haven't forgiven, or what the grudges that you're holding on to. It's just building up inside of you. You have another chance today to actually begin to release it. This is your moment. I want you to know that I've had to go back again and again and again in my heart and nail the names of people and the hurts that they caused me to the cross. And the names of the people that I was having such a hard time forgiving. It took a while, but they are forgiven. And my heart is clear and clean. There's no more bitterness. Refusing to forgive is actually the best barometer of your walk with God. Refusing to forgive is actually the best barometer of your walk with God. Probably more than anything else. We think that we got a lot to, we think that going to a lot of church meetings, serving in the same spot for 20 years, being in all the different Bible studies in the week, memorizing verses, giving to the poor, helping homeless people, we think that makes us a good Christian. We fill in all of these blanks, all of the things that we think show our love to Jesus Christ. But if you really, really want to know how deep your walk is with God, tell me how quickly and how easily and how completely you forgive. That will tell you where you are in your walk with God. Because an unforgiving Christian is an oxymoron. An unforgiving Christian is an oxymoron. There is no such thing. Those who have been graced can grace. Those who have received mercy can give mercy. Those who have been loved to the depths of their broken souls can love those in their lives who too are in desperate need of mercy and grace and forgiveness. And the second step is to start right now. Start today. That's the second step. You and I can begin with a grateful heart. We can pray something like, God, I tell you again how grateful I am for the love you have given me, for the way that you have poured your mercy out, for the fact that you took a debt that I couldn't pay. I thank you. And because of that, I am willing to forgive. So we have communion following the sermon today. And as we head into the time of communion here in a few minutes, I have an ask of you. So on the bottom of your sermon handout, or maybe if you didn't get one, any blank sheet of paper will do. On the bottom of your sermon handout is a blank section, and it asks the question, who do I need to forgive today? I'd like for you to tear off that part, or just a little piece of that, and I want you to write on there the name, or the names of the unforgiven in your life. Please don't try to tell me that there's no one. Honestly, it's hard for me to believe that. You can be in denial if you want to be. That's between you and God, but I can guarantee you that there is someone in your past that you haven't forgiven, or even in your present. It doesn't have to be some massive hurt. You guys, I get mad at Deidre for the dumbest things. And I find that I hold on to those things. And sometimes I realize days later that I'm still mad at her over something that was so simple and really nothing. She had a bad day and she snapped at me. Or she had a bad day and she didn't listen. Or she had a bad day and it was my fault anyway. But I was mad about it. I find myself holding on. It doesn't have to be some gigantic thing. But somewhere, someplace in your life, there's unforgiveness. We're going to take a minute in the quietness as the elements pass and as they go by, and just listen to the music that's playing. Commune with God. Maybe you're writing down that name and you're saying, God, this is the person. I don't know how to release him yet, but this is the person. Some of you will find this is the most incredible moment of freedom. In the quietness, you and God do some business. He or she doesn't deserve it, and that's the point. You may find that you have to do, as I have had to do with particular situations, and nail those things again and again and again to Jesus' cross. But a counselor can't release you from the bitterness you're holding on to. Your pastor can't release you from the resentment that you've held on to in your heart. Your boyfriend can't release you. Your girlfriend can't release you. Nothing can release you except if you take it to Jesus' cross. So after we take communion, take that piece of paper that you wrote that name on, and we'll be going around with the basket with the communion. Crumple it up and throw it in the basket with juice cups. Like you're throwing it away. You're giving it to God. If you're ready to let go, if you're ready today, maybe for the first time to say, God, because you have forgiven me, I choose. I make a human choice to forgive this person. Put that name in the baskets as it goes by. Some of you need to start at the beginning. You're desperately in need to be forgiven by God. You're a prodigal son. We're all prodigal sons and daughters. We've all strayed away from God, all of us. So today, this may be the moment for you to say, God, I'm coming back. And just know that he's scanning the horizon, waiting to see if you're coming. His arms are ready to receive you. Some of you are Christ followers, and you have been for a while. And by all appearances, you look pretty good. Very few people suspect that you're carrying around pounds and pounds of resentment and bitterness and guilt. Let him go. Let her go. Let them go. You have been forgiven a debt that you cannot pay. Do it for someone else. So let's pray. Father, your word is disturbing. It just strips away all of me. We try to live our lives and make nice and make everybody